Welcome back to the Championship, Norwich City. That's not how it was supposed to go, but Norwich City have come out 1-0 losers at Cardiff in their first game of the Championship season. Not anything particularly encouraging to report. Obviously, we'll get into quite what went wrong, and there were a number of aspects I felt here at the Cardiff City Stadium. First to address, I know this is usually Connor's spot post-match. He was just down speaking to Dean Smith in his post-match press conference, so I'm filling in for the next couple of weeks. Hopefully, I fill his shoes fairly adequately. I know he's very good at his job, so I'm sure that'll be tough. But yeah, just to crack on with the post-mortem of that event. I mean, it went wrong in a number of ways. Really, I think I predicted before the game on several of our channels on the Pinkham podcast in our window watch preview before this game that it would be drab, but I certainly wasn't prepared for the first 30-40 minutes where there was just no real quality on display whatsoever. There was plenty of endeavour. I thought Norwich stood up to the physical battle fairly well, and the general consensus seems to be that was the case. I think there was a couple of players really trying to make things happen. Todd Cantwell was trying absolutely everything to get on the ball wherever possible. Max Aarons, I thought, especially in the second half, sort of took the ball by the horns and realised nobody else is going to make this happen. But that was where the problem lay, really, because this is a Norwich team that was full of creativity just a couple of years ago, that had a number of players where you felt like a magic moment could come from them at any point in the game, and it got to sort of 60-70 minutes, I felt, and you didn't think that there was anybody on that pitch that was going to make that moment happen. Throughout the game, really, there was a lot of sideways passing. There was a lot of looking up and not seeing too many options. I remember one point towards the end of the match when Kenny McLean took about 5 or 6 seconds to just look for somebody, and there was nobody offering short, nobody offering wide. And he ended up just having to punt it long to Jordan Hugill, who had nobody around him, and flicked it on to nobody. And that moment, I thought, highlighted another problem, which was that this Dean Smith Norwich City side, I'm afraid, doesn't know what it is. It doesn't know what it's trying to do. And that example was perfect in that if you want to go long to Jordan Hugill, perfectly legitimate tactic. There'll be teams in the Championship that will do things like that this season, and Hugill is a physical, capable attacker in that department. But if you're going to do that, you want players to be ready to come in behind him and help him out. They weren't ready for that. They also weren't really ready, it seems, to be part of a Fark Ball-esque, dare I say, at this dark moment team. They didn't look like they were ready to assemble a team that was full of movement and rotations and possession. So, I just don't know where they go from here in terms of knowing what they are. I actually spoke to Kenny McLean a few minutes after the end of the match, and they've just stopped cutting the grass here at the Cardiff City Stadium, so hopefully that provides you with a better experience as a listener. But I spoke to Kenny McLean following the match, and even when I asked him the question, I asked him in a pretty simple way. I was trying to leave it open because I know how much people want to know what Dean Smith's side looks like, and I think Kenny did his best. High press was what he forced out eventually, but it didn't feel like he particularly knew how to define the team. And if you look back to the last game Norwich played in the Championship at Barnsley, which was possibly the worst pitch I've ever seen Norwich play a game on, and they were passing it around like nobody's business, and everybody knew what they were trying to do. Now, I really struggle to define this Norwich team. I think there's Todd Cantwell, who maybe would like to be in that sort of possession-based system that would suit him. He was really giving it everything to try and supply those balls. You've got Josh Sargent, who it was the very first action of the game was actually a long ball up to him, and I turned to Connor and I said, get used to a lot more of that. But it turned out that wasn't really what they were trying to do. It was a bit of everything, and I think maybe when you consider that, you have to consider the opposition. Nobody really knew what Cardiff would look like going into the game. They've made, I think, 13 signings this summer, and maybe even Steve Morrison would have had questions over what his team would look like this afternoon. And therefore, Dean Smith is a manager who likes to react to the opposition. He likes to base his tactical setup on what will hurt them and what will restrict what they want to do. He had obviously very little to read into in terms of what they would look like. So I think it was a showing of maybe what happens when Smith is left to create his own idea of football, and I'm sure he does have that, but this squad isn't assembled to any particular setup, any particular style. It's not been recruited to do one particular thing, and I think all that cohesion that was in the club until fairly recently, I don't know where all that's gone, because at one stage it felt like every single person in the football club was trying to achieve the same thing, culturally, on the pitch, in terms of the ambition, and now I just think those stars aren't aligned anymore, and that was what we saw out on the pitch today. Worth highlighting that the last time Norwich were in the Championship, they broke their record Championship points total, and they started quite poorly. There were quite a lot of these sorts of games, but the worrying element for me is that at that point they had the quality to come through those games and just scrap to victories. I remember a 2-1 win at Rotherham where they were second best, and Buendia and Hugo sort of came through with two good performances to earn that for Norwich. But I don't see who's going to drag them through. I think looking at Todd Cantwell, and I've spoken a lot about the endeavour that he provided already, I think he's a good player, and I think he's a real good, if his heart is in it, and that's what I'm getting from watching pre-season and watching his performance today, then he can be a real asset to Norwich City. But I don't think he's the sort of player like Emi Buendia that's going to grab the ball by the horns and realise nobody else is going to do this for me. I need to do this, and there's nothing wrong with that. If it was a team full of players with the quality of Todd Cantwell, I think Norwich would have done a lot better than they did this afternoon. But the unfortunate truth is that they don't have that player to dig them out of holes like they had in Emi Buendia, and when they're not quite on it, and they haven't been quite on it for a good long while now, it feels very unlikely. And you're looking out even against Championship opposition and thinking, where is the goal going to come from? And you're left thinking that quite a lot today. Just to sort of touch upon some of the key incidents, haven't even mentioned yet, 8 minutes into the video, that Grant Hanley was sent off for what I felt was two harsh yellow card offences. There was one big melee, and it was quite hard to establish what went on, to be honest, but it didn't really look like Hanley did much other than stand in the vicinity of Ng, who ended up on the floor covering his face, and of course that means a yellow card for Hanley, although it looked like actually Andrew Omobamidele did a lot of the damage in that situation. But yeah, and then it was another fairly inconspicuous tackle. I can't remember on which Cardiff player, but he sort of came in from behind. It sort of clipped him, and I'm not sure it was a yellow card, but I think as a summation of two yellow cards, it was a very difficult red card to take, I think. Having said that, I've just heard Dean Smith doing a radio interview, and he said that he didn't feel it was particularly harsh, which is good. I think it's refreshing not to hear excuses, because I think there's a lot of managers that would come out and, following such a damaging loss, would come out and look for excuses. It doesn't sound like Dean Smith is in that department, although I have also heard that he was pleased with his side's performance, and that worries me. He's one of the managers that likes to keep his cards close to his chest, so if he was furious, I don't think he would come out shouting about his players to the press, but I'm not sure that's the right message to be giving off now, that this Norwich team is a good Norwich team, because if this is a good Norwich team, I and you are in for a long and difficult season. They looked devoid of that creativity. Obviously that's been an issue for most of last season and, well, all of this season so far. They didn't look like they had too many solutions. There was one time Max Aaron sort of burst into the box, and that was the most productive Norwich were at any point. The ball ended up actually ricocheting off him and out for a goal kick, so that tells you everything you need to know about how productive Norwich were. There were some decent signs from Onel Hernandez off the bench. He looked close to getting in behind once or twice, but when the moment of quality was really required, he drove a low cross into the body of Alsop, the Cardiff goalkeeper. So you're left with a lot of questions, and it's getting quite boring talking about this now, to be honest, because the number of times that we've said there's more questions than answers about this Norwich City side, it's frustrating, because I understand, and I get a lot of messages and a lot of people saying to me, can you just ask Dean Smith what what he wants, and we've tried. But I don't think anyone in this squad, in the backroom staff, is 100% sure what they're trying to achieve with this Norwich team, and that's the main takeaway from this game for me. The team that he picked was pretty similar to what we could have guessed. Tim Krul in goal, Max Aarons, Grant Hanley, Andrew Omobamidele, Dimitris Giannoulis. Midfield, it looked like a sort of 4-2-3-1 with Kenny McLean and Jakob Sorensen at the base. Josh Sargent on the right, Todd Cantwell as a number 10, Milo Rashica on the left, and Tamu Pukki up front. And I want to touch on Sorensen because I said before the game that this was a real big opportunity for him. Obviously, you've got competition in Gabriel Sara and potentially Nunez coming in as well. Isaac Hayden also, when he returns from injury in probably a matter of weeks or months rather than days. But the situation is that Sorensen maybe won't have too many more opportunities to impress and to have little competition in midfield. He won't be guaranteed a start henceforth, and I think this was a really good opportunity for him to show. Maybe he hasn't impressed as much as a lot of people internally within the club, as much as amongst the fans had hoped he would, but it was a good opportunity for him to prove that he could at least do something in the midfield in the Championship, and I thought he was fine, but he didn't really grasp that opportunity with two hands. And defensively, I'm just not sure once again that they've actually recruited the physical enforcer that they hoped they would. I just think he's another good technical midfielder. Reminds me of Tom Tribal, which is ironic because I remember at one stage being told he had been called within the club Tribal with legs, and I'm not sure we've seen those legs too much or that physicality. He just looks like a pretty good technical player. And similarly to Cantwell, that's fine to have that in your squad, but you need somebody else to grab the ball by the horns, in this case defensively, and they're relying a lot upon the likes of Isaac Hayden and Sarah to be able to do that. Maybe in a couple of months we'll be looking at it and thinking all Norwich had to do was get Hayden back in the team and they're sorted. But in 2 months' time, how far behind are Norwich going to be? The Championship is rapid, and I don't know how many games are in that period, but I would imagine it's a lot, and it's probably enough to put you in a real bad situation, especially given Dean Smith's current position as manager and current situation. He's yet to impress Norwich fans, and I think if I was him, I'd be willing Hayden to be as available as quick as is physically possible, because they really do need somebody like that. They need a defensive midfielder and a creative midfielder, and we've been saying that since Oliver Skipp and Emi Buendia left. And they haven't got a replacement yet. So let's hope that Gabriel Sara or Marcelino Nunez is the creative player and Isaac Hayden is the defensive midfielder, because if not, I don't think Norwich are going to be promoted from the Championship this season. And I also think they need to establish what they really think they are. That was what I took away from this game. And I know it's boring. I know we were hoping that this was going to be the time when we really start to learn things about Norwich. And you've heard me and my colleagues talk about this issue for a long time. But well, that speaks to the situation, really. I'll quickly go through player ratings. Tim Krul, I'd give a 6. Didn't really have too much to do, to be honest. That goal went in, but it was difficult. I think it was deflected, and it was a decent strike from Romain Sawyers. Max Aarons, probably worthy of a 7, because he looked like the only person that could possibly make something happen in that second half. Andrew Omobamidele, 6 again. Grant Hanley, you've got to give a 5, because I know I spoke about how harsh I felt personally the red card was, but you can't put yourself in that position. And I felt Norwich were maybe too, at times, amped up by Cardiff's antics, and they're going to have to deal with a lot of that. They're going to be the favourites in almost every match they enter this season, and they're going to have to deal with a lot of that behaviour, and they rose to it a little bit too much in that melee in the second half, I thought. Milo Rashica, I'll have to give it's probably between a 4 and a 5. I'll give him a 5, because there were times when I watched him and I thought, if you can unlock your potential and if you can perform as I know he's performed before, then he could be a huge asset to Norwich. But the problem is, well, one problem is that he wasn't doing that, and another problem, to be fair to him, is that there were a couple of times he looked like he was going to start a counter-attack, was surrounded by 4 Cardiff defenders and had absolutely nobody to pass to. Looking further down the list, Todd Cantwell, 6, a lot of endeavour, not too much end product. There were a couple of times he could have slid players in. There was one time there was a sort of semi-easy pass on to Josh Sargent, and he failed to make that, and I think that could have been Norwich's clearest opportunity, but you can't fault him for endeavour, and in terms of attitude, it does look almost like a different player to the one we saw on the pitch for Norwich last season. Jakob Sorensen, 6, obviously went into him in depth, and I think he could have done certain things better, but the main takeaway is that he's not the player that they hoped they'd signed when they did. Teemu Pukki, I felt for him, and there's probably another discussion to be had there. Another quote I heard from Smith was that he feels Pukki is basically a fantastic goal scorer, highlighted his goal scoring record in the Championship and said that they need to service him better, and I totally agree. He looked incredibly isolated throughout the match, really, and then went off injured. And anyone that hasn't seen sort of Dean Smith's quotes following the match, the good news is that it was just cramp, and it doesn't look like it's going to be a long-term issue for Teemu Pukki. Kenny McLean, probably another 6, a lot of endeavour once again. Josh Sargent, I think showed quality at moments in the first half and definitely made himself available a number of times, but once again he lacks spark, potentially more than any attacking player in this Norwich squad. Dimitris Giannoulis, I think he's the final one. Sorry, I'm working my way down the programme, which you can see here. If the way that I'm doing this isn't making sense, but Dimitris Giannoulis I felt for a little bit. Clearly got the technical quality, but he looked frustrated at times, as did most of the team. So I'd give him a 5 as well. 5, and leave you with the fact that frustration, I think, was the key word. Still yet to find out what this Norwich City team is. Let's hope we have some sort of clearer idea at Carrow Road, and we'll see you there. Thank you very much for tuning in. Obviously, much more reaction, debate and analysis from the game. I know it's maybe not your favourite game to recap too many times, but we'll hopefully be looking for some ways that Norwich can improve and some ways to find some optimism. So keep it locked to the Pink and Plus app, and we'll see you very soon.